at strings in Python today. But before we go to strings in Python, before we go to strings in Python, I also like to continue from where we stopped in the last class, and which was about the loops, that we looked at. So I'll be sharing my screen shortly. So let me share my screen and let's go navigate back, go to where we had a previous class. So let me check. Let me go to loops. And so we looked at the loops, and we looked at how can we break through a particular loop, which we gave an example here. We said that for I in range 30, in a 101, if that particular I, that is the element in that particular loop, is definitely, if that element in the loop is divisible by, it has a modulo division and there's no remainder, it means you should print that element and break it. This break means that anytime it reaches this condition, we should end the loop. So that is what happens here. We go so that it gave us 30. I don't know, can anyone see my screen?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, good. All right. So we saw one for I in range 30, 101. It means that this is the starting number, and this is where we are ending. I remember when we were looking at range, the last number doesn't come. It's only the number just before the other one, the next one that comes out. So this particular will be 100 instead of 101. So we said that if this I, the element in the loop, is divisible, once it's divided by 11, that's a modulo division. If there is no remainder, we are going to break the for loop. So that's what happened here when we did the print statement. Once we printed it out, we saw that it started with 30, it got to 31, 32, and 33. 33 is definitely divisible by 11. And once it divides 11, there is no remainder. That's why it stopped at 33, because we had set it to print I and break a word at that 33. So without wasting much of our time, let me go straight to the next concept of when it comes to trying to manage or try to deal with your loops in coding in Python. For example, we're going to look at another statement. We're going to use a practical example as well. So what we're going to do now, we're going to add another cell to this. So let's add a cell. Okay, we're here. Let's add a cell. Let's add a cell and let's see what we can do. So sometimes we need to skip the current iteration or the current cycle and pass it with the next one. For these cases, we use continue instead of break. So that's what we're going to look at, and let's see how we can make it happen. So continue will not finalize all the loop like break. It will not stop the loop from working. It will only skip that particular kind of condition. It will only finalize the current iteration that we were trying to do, was give a condition. So let me go straight. I don't like talking too much. Let me go straight to an example that we can use the continue statement. So we want to print even numbers from 1 to 10. How can we make that possible? We want to print even number from 1 to 10. We are going to use the continue statement. So for I, that I is an element in the loop. For I in range, remember range is a function in Python that gives us a particular range of values. For I in range, your starting number is 1, and we're moving up to, remember we said even numbers from 1 to 10, so we're going to use 11 because 11 will not be counted in the range. By the time we do this, we give a colon and we enter. This will give us in a block of code, and anything that we do here is going to make a whole lot of sense. So what we are going to use, a practical example of continue is, instead of saying we are looking for even numbers, it means that we want it to skip odd numbers. So what we are going to do is to give conditions for odd numbers and use the continue. So if I gives a modulo, the modulo division, and it's 2, by the time it's 2 and the remainder is 1. It means that particular number is what? Odd. And when it does that, we want it to continue. We want it to do what? Continue. What does it mean to continue? It means that we're going to skip these particular conditions for what? For odd numbers, and we're going to print in only the even numbers here. So what do? We come down here and do what? And leave this particular loop for if, and print and continue to do what? And print the what? And print the I itself. You can remember, you can name it anything. So by the time we do this, let's see what we have. So you can see it starts from 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. Because if I modulo 2 equals 1 is what? Continue. It means that we want it to continue the loop, but we don't want it to involve the particular conditions for what? Odd number. We could have done the same thing. We can say let's print odd numbers from let's say 1 to 10. So instead of this particular 2 equals 1, we could have done what? 0, and it will print only what? Odd numbers from what? 1 to what? 10. So exactly what we were trying to explain. So let me give another example. Let's see. Let's say we want to print the letters in a string. We want to print a letters in a string. And if we encounter the space character, we will skip that character and we'll print the characters but space. We'll not do what involve space. So let's see a practical example using text. We've been using numbers. So let's define a variable. A variable equals to what? The user will input a particular value. Definitely default input comes with as a string. So you are going to ask the user, prompt the user to please enter what? Enter a text. By the time the user enters a text, enter a text. So what are we going to tell the user to do? We are going to use that information from the user and work with it. So now the next thing we're going to do is to print a for loop that will definitely do what? Work with us. So for, you can name it anything, but in this particular case, I can decide to say for let's say for, can say maybe we can just say character in this particular text in which the user is going to do what? Come and bring in. So what are we going to do? For this, in this, if, remember we're looking for space. If it is a space, we want it to do what? Continue. That means it's going to skip that particular space. So if character we're going to have inside the elements of the loop is what? Equals what? A space character, which is what we are going to. This is a space character right now. This is a space. So what is it going to do? Once it encounters a space, we want it to do what? Continue. And by the time it continues, we want it to do what? We press enter, backspace, we go back to the for loop block and say, okay, print what? Print the character itself. So print what? Character. By the time it prints character, what are we going to do? We're going to, let's run this and see what by ourselves. Let's see what will happen. So by the time we say, please enter a text. So what is the text I want to enter? I can decide to say Python. I can see I've added a space is fun. Okay, so I've added two spaces now. So let's see what will happen now. And let's press enter. So you can see, guys, Python. It has, instead of being a space, it has done what? It has ignored that space and does what? Continue the loop, and we are actually what? Done with that particular what? Coding in what? In that example. So I don't know if you have any questions right now. If you don't have any questions, please ask questions right now. If you don't have any questions, we have to run as far as we can to, we have to rush as far as we can to strings. Strings is a new thing entirely, in which you have to pay serious attention, though it might seem very what do you call it? simple, but it's something that you have a lot of manipulations under it. By the time you manipulate strings, you know that a lot of things could actually be wonderful as well. So let me know if you have any questions regarding this particular continuum. Otherwise, we move straight to strings in Python. Any questions? Any questions? I can see Dr. David is here with us. Dr. David, you're welcome. Mr. Samuel Adeyele, welcome. I'm very glad that you could join us today, even with the tight schedule. Welcome. So anybody, any questions? So if there are no questions, we can go straight to strings in Python. Who has any idea about strings? Who has heard about strings? We have used strings in this, we have used it almost every time. Even in the recent example I just did, I just used strings. So I don't know if you have any idea about strings. What do you understand by strings? Please, and just unmute yourself and say one or two things. Anybody that has information about strings?
Hello, good evening, everyone.
Yes, good evening, Mr. Sunday.
Okay, I think strings is just a combination of characters.
Strings are combinations of characters, okay? Strings are combinations of characters. When you mention characters, what do you mean by characters? That's very important.
Okay, so, like letter, space.
Okay, the rest, okay, nevertheless. So what I would like to add to strings is like strings, you can always find them in quotations. You can always find them. I can decide to use numbers, but as far as I put them in a quotation, that is the open and close quotes. It could be single quotes, it could be double quotes. All of them are what are going to be what's known as strings, even though it's a number. So as far as it's inside that string, it will definitely be what as far as it's inside that quotation, it is definitely a string. So we're going to go to string properly. We're going to make sure things work out for us. Sorry for that. So I can decide to create a new notebook, and let me create a new notebook and name it strings, because we're going to be looking at new things here. So it's still loading at some point. So let me try. It's loading now. So I can decide to connect and decide to name these. Let me name these strings. So strings, okay? So strings. So it's very, very important that you understand the different concepts of strings, and let's see how we can do. So strings are different from other primitive types. You have the integers, you have the floats, you have the bools, and so on. And what I want you to know that strings are what sequences. When I said sequences, it means that they have their order. They have their order. You can use indexing also on strings, and it will definitely work as well. Remember that strings include arrays of characters in them. That is why it's making you to what a sequence. For example, if you look at a particular word, let me use Python. Let me use Python because we are familiar with Python. So we can see that Python itself is what is a sequence on its own. P is different. P has a unique kind of order right now. Y has a unique order, T, H, O, and N. Other sequence types that we know of, apart from the string, we have the list, we have the tuple, which we are going to also look at it as we proceed. So let's see how we can actually explain the concept of string is a sequence. So I'll go straight to maybe I'll go straight to a particular fruit. I can just decide to use fruit, and I decide to use for string. Let me use apple for now. So if I use apple right now, and I say, okay, I want to access the very first element of apple, which is A. How am I going to do that? I can decide to run this for now and add another cell and said, okay, fruits. Definitely, we are call the variable name fruit, and we give it a square bracket. And since I told you that it's a sequence of string is a sequence, I can access the first element of this particular fruit of this particular sequence, which is fruit, and it's apple right now, what am I going to do? The indexing, I told you indexing starts from what? 0. So the index of the very first letter here is 0. So by the time we call out the variable name and put in 0 here, and we run this, we decide to run this, we're going to see that the value we're going to have is what? A, because that is its own index. If we decide to do for 1, we're going to have P. If we decide to do for 2, we're going to have P again because APP. We decide to have 0, 1, 2, 3. 3 will be what? Will be what? L, and 4 will be what? Will be E. So that's a practical example of showing that a particular what they call it string is what is made up of sequence. We will still definitely see them as we proceed. And I also want to explain another concept to you when it comes to order and index. If you look at this particular apple here, you can see that the index of this A is 0, but the order of it is 1. The index of this first P the index is 1, but the order here is what? 2. Please pay attention. It's going to be very, very important as we move ahead. Please, if you do not understand, right now I may not be seeing your hands up, but always try as much as you can unmute yourself and say that you don't understand, and I will go back to it. So what I'm trying to tell you that index and what order are kind of what interrelated, and you're going to see them as we proceed. So the next thing I'm going to look at is the string length. How can we actually see that? How can we actually know how many characters are there in a particular length of sequence? How can we know that? We use that. How can we get to know it? Is how we do what? We are going to use a particular concept or particular this thing in Python known as the len function. In Python, to get the length of sequence types, we use a standard function known as what? Len. And I'm going to show you practically here. So how can we find the len function of the len of this fruit? We're going to just type len, and we're going to put it in parentheses, open and close, and reference the sequence name, which was what? The fruit itself. By the time we run this, we're going to see that it's going to give us 5. Not because what they call it, we are going to, the length of fruit is going to give us what? 5. We want to get the last element. The index is what? 5. Okay, you can see all this, how you can see it practically as we are seeing it right now. So it's something that we can actually see by ourselves. So the length of fruit here is what? 5. We put any particular thing here, it will give us what? This particular one, it will also give us the exact number of the characters that are actually here. So if we want to get let me try to explain something right now. What if we want to get the last element of this particular? I want to try to. There's something I want to try to explain right now. I want to put index and order, and I'm going to use the len function here. So I'm trying to get something right. So let me see. Let me put a variable and attach it to the len and subtract something. Let's see what we have. Let me try a particular thing. I think I've not done this in a while. Let me just try to get something. So let me see the last index. Let me use last index. I want to get the last index of a particular. So let me try something. So len, and I'm going to reference the fruit itself. So fruit, and let me try -1. By the time I try -1 here, let's see what we'll have. Let me see what we'll have. So by the time we call this, let me run this first. I've defined it in a variable LastIndex, and I put it as a code and as a new cell. And I said, okay, let's see what we'll have. Let me call the LastIndex last_index. So tap and let's see what we have. So you can see the last index here is what? The last index here is 4. Now, if the last index here is 4, what are we going to do? Remember that this 0, 1, 2, as we remember when it comes to index this thing. So now let's assess the last element, not the last index, the last element. How are we going to do that? We're going to do that by saying the last element, we're going to define another variable. The last element, last underscore element, you reference the variable name and you're going to put in what? Let me show you something, a concept right now. Please, at any point if you don't understand, unmute yourself and talk to me. So let me define another function, last underscore element. I want to get the last element of that particular value. Last underscore element equals to what? The fruit itself. And I'm going to do what? Reference is almost the same thing as adding numbers to it, but I just want to use variable names to try to get you to understand this whole thing of index and what and the order of it as we proceed. So by the time we do this, we can see now last underscore element equals to the fruit in which you have defined already that has apple, and the last index itself, which is going to be what? Which is what? The index of what? Which you have already seen the output here to be what? 4. This particular one to be 4. So let's see what we have if we call this last index out. Okay, so let's create another cell and let's say last. Please, if you are using PyCharm, always make sure that you use print. This is more of like what I normally use for my day-to-day life. So sometimes I may not need to use the print statement at some point. So if I decide to say the last element, now you can see that the last element here is now what? E. I could have just decided to just say whatever we're having, this and this, and let me go straight to the point. But I'm trying to explain the whole relationship between len and what? Index and also the element itself. So you can see the last underscore index equals to len, which already said that the len here is what? 5. So then the last index is going to be what? That particular len minus what? 1 itself, because normally it's supposed to be 5, but using the indexing of, remember that indexing starts from what? 0. That's why we got to have the last index to be what? 4 here, when the len already is what? 5. Okay, so in one line I can decide to just say fruits. I just want to use from people that don't like bulky codes, and just use len, and I reference the fruit itself, and I say, okay, anytime I have the fruits, let me just subtract the len, and let me just subtract it by 1. If I run this particular code, it will still give me the value for what? E. It means that inside my fruit, if I get the len of that particular fruit, which is 5, and I say 5 minus 1, which is 4, and I reference it as what? 4. Inside this particular place, the output here is 4. So fruit, if they're looking at the index of it to be what? 4, it means it's going to give me the what? The last element. So that's what I wanted to show you at some point. And at this point, I would like to pause and ask you, do you understand what is going on? Do you understand what I've just done? If you don't understand, please raise up your hand and let me know how far. Okay, I believe we are good to go. Any questions? Okay. Okay, I think no question. Nobody's asking questions. Or
Yes,
are you guys?
Sorry.
Okay, no problems. Okay.
Where's the E coming from?
Where is the E coming from? The E is coming from the apple itself that we have. Fruit is equals to apple.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Thank you, sir.
All right. Any other questions? Okay. Any other questions? Please, we are trying to manipulate strings by all means possible. We are looking at different data types, those fundamental data types that each of them that we have to go through it, look at different methods we want to use on it, and see how we can make it work for us so that we'll be fully grounded. And we know that once we get to an advanced stage, we'll be dealing with these data types with all amounts of confidence, and we know what we are actually doing. So that's why I'm bringing each data types one by one again to make sure that we get it right. Okay, so the next one I'm going to look at, I'm going to use, I've used only just one fruit, and I said only apple. What if we decide to use two variable names, and we are going to look at different values, and let's see how we can make it work for us. So let's try to create another thing. So let's name a particular variable and just use maybe I can put it as let's say machine. I decide to use as machine learning. So this is for people that are that will be going to machine learning after this course, or data science, or what they call it, data analysis. Don't worry about it. You're getting there one step at a time. You have to have a foundational knowledge of a particular thing. So let's say, let me just use Axion, and just use Axion. Let's just say Axion 02. Axion 02. Okay. So by the time we make this, please ignore this 1 and 2. These are line numbers. These are the main thing we can. Please don't go and type 1x equals to here. These are the line numbers here. Please pay attention. It's very, very important. So by the time we want to bring these two things together, we can decide to run this first of all. And by the time we run this first of all, it's working for us. We add another cell, and we can decide to say x, comma, y. By the time we run this, it will come together, and it's going to be in the form of what? A tuple. It's going to print the outcome in the form of a tuple. A tuple is always in what they call it, a normal parentheses bracket that we know. Don't worry, we are still going to go to tuple in the future. Please pay attention and understand that a tuple is always found in this normal bracket. Okay, so how can we now find the length of these two things? We can just remember how we did it. How can we find the length? We can do the length at the same time. Length of what? X. And you're going to just put, I decide to put comma, length of what? Y. By the time we print this out, we're going to see it's going to come out. The first one is 16. The other one is 11. Exactly what we wanted to make it up for us. So we can see a lot of functions, a lot of things that we are doing in strings. So strings as actually something that is actually very simple enough. I'm just going through it so that we'll know how we can get to it. So the next one I'm going to look at.
I can't see your screen. Sorry.
Hello, Sekemini.
Yes, who cannot see my screen?
I phone.
Oh, I don't know. Is anybody having the same issue?
Yes.
No, okay. My
Mr.
hand is off a different question.
Okay, no problem. I'll get to you, Mr. Mark. Can anybody see my screen apart? But Mr. Mark, you can see my screen. Let me start with you.
Yes, I can see your screen.
Okay. You go to your question.
Okay, it's blank. Oh, it's blank.
Maybe you should log back out. You should log out and come back in. Mr. Mark, you have the floor.
Okay, my question is that in calculating the length of the string, does it take account into the empty space? Is the empty space counted as a character?
A space is a character. Yes, it is.
Thank you.
Yes, it is. It's very, very, anything that is inside that particular string is a character. Anything at all. Even though it's space, even though it's double space, there's double space, that's 2 characters. That's how it is. Okay. So without wasting much time, let's go straight and let's go to the next thing operation we want to do is called string slicing. A part is what we call slicing. It means that a part of a sequence is called a slice. A part of a sequence, maybe a particular number, a particular thing. So for slicing, we normally use indexing for it to work for us. And please pay attention to what I want to say. There are certain rules in slicing when it comes to slicing strings. And let me just say, for a sequence of a string, the very first one we're going to use, the very first number that comes inside the, remember I said it's going to use an indexing. So the very first one that comes inside that square bracket is going to be where you're going to start from. And the next one that is separated with a colon is what is the end. Where do you want to end? Just like we did for range and other things. Where is it going to end? And after the colon again, the next thing that's going to come is the step that we're going to take, exactly as what we have been doing so far. So another thing that we can decide to start, we can decide to leave the start index blank, and it will take a default of what? 0. It will take, by the time you leave the very first step, the very first thing that is supposed to be inside the sequence of a string, if you leave it blank, it's going to take a default of what? 0. The next one is going to do that is where the end, where you want the string to do or the index to end. If you leave it blank, it's going to take the default of the what? The last index, well, which you are going to see practically as well. Now, the next thing is the step. It's what is the last thing that is going to come inside that square bracket if you decide to put it. If you leave it blank, it's going to take a default of 1. It means it's going to look as it's going to add, it's going to be taking what? Each step of what? 1. Now, start is included, end is excluded. So if the start is what included, the end is also what is excluded, we're going to see how it will do what? Perform for us. So let's create a practical example here. Let's see what we have. Remember, we're still looking at strings, and let's define a variable. Let's say variable name is what? S. And let's say Python and so on. So let's just create a variable and just say Python. Remember, it's Python what? And so on. You can see I've given a space that has a character on its own, and I give it what? Hands on, hands, and decide to use a capital letter here, hands what? On. So you can see now, guys, that the index of P here is 0. The index of Y here is 1. The index of T here is 2, 3, 4, 5. The space here is what? The space here is what? 6. The H here is what? 7. Until we get there, until we get to the final one, which is what you can see here at the end is going to be what? 14. Even this dash here is a what? A character on its own, and it is what? It takes the index of what? 12. So let's start slicing. Let's see what slicing is actually all about. Remember that is what? A part of a sequence is called what? A slice. So let's add some things and let's start slicing using what I just said. So S, I want to slice this particular string variable that I've defined. Let's remember we're going to put it in a square bracket, and I want to do something like this. So 0, it means that is the starting, where we want the index to start, and we want to move it up to an index of what? Of a particular index, which at some point it is what? I remember when I told you that once you that the end is not what? Included, that the end is what? Excluded. By the time you start, a start will also be there, just as we did in range. The start will be there, but whenever you get to the end, it will not be, it will be excluded, but it will now take the last one that comes in for it. So let's see what will happen. So let's see. So let's slice this particular string, and let's say 0. This is which is P, and let's slice it up to. Let me slice it up to. Let me just put 6 here. Let's see what it will give us. By the time we do this, let's see what we run this. You can see it gives us what? Python, because P is 0. It takes all the way. P is 0, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And at the end, it gave us what? Python. This n is 5, and 6 is not included, because as I told you, the last of them, the end of it is what? Excluded. Okay. So if you wanted this space to come in, you could have added what? You could have said 7, and at the end it will give us what? There will be a space here at the end. So let's just try and see. Added 7 to it, and let's run it. You can see what happens. So you can see there is a space after what the Python is here. You can see this particular space. Okay, so that's a very practical example of a list slicing. We want to slice a particular. So the next thing we want to do is, remember when I told you that instead of, even though you don't put in the what, even though you don't put in the starting what number, like the starting index you want to use, it takes a default of what? of, let's see what it will have. Let's see it practically. So we put it in here and we leave it blank and put in a what, the colon, and still do the 6 itself. Let's see what it will give us. So you can see it still give us what, Python. It means that the default starts here, takes the index of what, 0, and goes up to what, the last particular index of what, 6. But in this particular one, it is excluded. So it is landed in what, on the 5th what, index. So I think you can see what is going on right now. At any point, if you don't understand, unmute yourself and ask the question, because right now I'm not seeing your hands raised. So the next thing I'm going to do is, let's bring in the concept of the step size. Let's see the step size. So start slicing from index 0 up to index 6, and let's see what we have. So we can see we have done that already. And let's see, and you can see that the default step size, even though we did not put the step size here, you can see that the default step size here came out as what, 1, even though we have not put it. But if we decide to put it in the future, you can see that it will definitely, we're going to see it practically as well. So let's see, let's start sliding some things. Let's slice. I would like to give an example here right now. Let's slice. What can we do to slice hands? HANDS. What should we do? You can just put it in the chat box. What should we do to slice hands? HANDS. Hands. What is the thing that we're going to do? You can put it in the chat box right now, the chat room, or in the group, or you can just say how we can make it work for you. So how can you slice hands right now? Hands. Apart from, we have just done for Python, how can you slice just hands? HANDS. Please, you just have 2 minutes to do that. We have done that for Python here. PYTHON. How can we slice for what? HANDS. Hands. Please put it in the chat box, in the chat room, any way you want to put it. Please show us how you can slice hands. HANDS. Okay, very good, very good. I can see some options here. S, you put it 7, yes, 12. It shows that you guys are picking it up. Agreed. Someone said agreed. Okay, very good. Someone should disagree. Okay, it means that you guys are following it up. You are following it up because if you look at what happens here, it's actually true. It's going to show us hands. So let's see what Dr. David had just done. So let's try S, and let's put 7. Please pay attention, and let's put 12. Let's see what it will give us. So you can see it gives us what, hands. Why is it so? Because the starting here, you can see 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This is of 6, 7. This is 7. H is 7. 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So you see 12. 12 is what? This particular character of dash, but because it's always excluded, it takes in what? The S itself. Fantastic. Well done. Well done for those ones that tried. Now let's look at the step size. How can we get to the step size, and let's understand the whole concept of step size. So let's define numbers. Let's define numbers. Let's just define numbers, a variable name numbers, and we put it in what? In, let's say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, so let's try and create numbers instead. We want to print these numbers now. Let's enter and say numbers. You can see that it's going to print the numbers. Shift enter. You can see the numbers will come out as a string. This is a string right now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 is a string. So by the time it does that, we're going to say, now we want to get only the odd numbers. We want to get the odd numbers from these numbers, from these particular strings of numbers. How can we get the odd numbers inside this particular sequence of strings, or strings of sequence? Anyhow, we're going to explain. I told you that strings are sequence. So how can we get only odd numbers here? So we're going to use the concept of step size here. And where are we going to go into? You can see that the first number there is 1, and the index there is what? 0. which means that 1 already is a particular kind of odd, is a way of referencing an odd number, even when we're trying to use the modulo division. So if we do this, let's see how we can create only odd numbers from this. So number, we call the variable name and put it in a square bracket. By the time we put it in a square bracket, see what happens here. I'm going to leave the very first one blank, empty, because merely I leave the very first starting this thing empty, it means it's going to take the default index of what? 0, which is the default index of 0 here. The value here is the element there is what? 1. The next one we're going to look at is where do we want it to end? We don't want it to, we want it to take all over, to take the whole of the what? The sequence itself. So we are still going to leave that what? Particular what? Blank. So it means it is starting from the 0 index and is going through all the indexes in the indices of the words of this particular word series sequence of what strings. So now let's go to the next one. Now this is where the step size comes in. If the starting index is 0 here, and which is 1, it means that if we give it a step size of 2, it means it's going to skip the other one that is, for example, here we have 1, it's going to skip 2, and it's going to go to 3, and let's see what we'll have. So by the time we put a step size of 2, and we run this now, you can see it's going to give us 1, 3, 5, 7, and what? 9, because the step size is 2, and the starting number here is what? Is 1. Okay, so we can also now do the same. Anybody that wants to try it out for even numbers, let's see. Do the same thing and see how you can get even numbers from this particular string of numbers. Let's see what you can come up with. It should be something that we can actually use, think outside the box, and let's see. From what you have just done now, how can you get only even numbers from the strings that we have, the string of numbers that which we have done right now, and with my explanation so far. You just have just a minute to do that, and let's see what you come up with. With what I've just done right now, let's see what you can come up with. Okay. Let's see what you can come up with. Let's see. Someone is typing. Please also try to type something. In this place, we are allowed to fail. This is a safe space. We can make mistakes and we'll get corrected. It's better we make the mistakes here, which every programmer will do that at some point in his career. In fact, most times if you code, there's no way you code, you will not make mistakes. So try as much as possible. Always feel that you should try something as by yourself.
I'm always having challenges typing, so I was trying to type.
Okay, so
like,
what do you think your answer will be? Okay, what do you think yours will be, Mr. Sunday?
Okay, my answer, okay, it's starting from 1, that is the square bracket, 1.
Yes, okay.
Then the double distance, what's it called?
The colon.
Colon again, then 2.
Okay, that means you're not adding anything for the end. Okay, good. All right, so, okay, well done. Thank you very much for trying. Let's see what you are. Okay, Dr. Solomon has said something here, 1, colon 10, colon 2, and it's actually wonderful as well. So let's see what will be the outcome of it, which I know is very possible for it to be the answer. So let's see what Mr. Sunday has said right now. So because we definitely want it to start from 2, because 2 is an even number. So we decide to use numbers. Someone is typing. Let me see what the person has to do. For no index as 10 now. Let's see. If there's no index as 10, let's see what you are going to try all your codes here. So let's see what it will give. Okay. So let's use this particular one. We'll start. The starting one should be what? The index should be what? 1, because the index of this particular one is 2. By the time we do this, Mr. Sunday said we should leave this blank because it's going to take us to the end. So we're going to press 2. So let's see what we'll have. You can see give us 2, 4, 6, 8. So now let's try this and see. Let's add 10 here. And let's see what we have. So it still gave us what exactly what it has given us right now. So we can see 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, can see how it's actually working for us here. So it's very, very possible for it to work, but there's certain code editors that will not accept this at some point. So nevertheless, it's better that we use the other one instead of putting any this thing here. We'll just leave it at this particular stage.
Hello, Ekemini. Sorry to cut it. I'm getting an error on the PyDroid.
That's why I said I just said it now. That did you add 10 to it?
No.
What was your code? What was the code you used? Remember, you are going to print this out. In PyDroid, you print it out. You are not using this. Is
okay. I didn't print.
In Py, yeah, print it out. It's going to work for you. All right. So that's it for now. So now, guys, I believe you understand what I've just done right now. Please, if you have any questions, let me know. Okay. All right. So let's continue. Let's continue with our class. So let's see. The next thing I'm going to look at is how can we, if you want to slice all, to copy the whole sequence, how can we copy the whole sequence? How can we copy the whole sequence? So let me, guys, please excuse me, let me get. Okay, guys, can you hear me? Sorry for that. I think I had a little, someone just called up on my name and there was nobody to answer, so I had to step out. Okay, good. Someone is saying numbers. How can we copy? Very good. For us to copy a particular kind of strings or sequence of strings, we need to just use, we're going to use this. Please pay attention. It's going to be numbers. As exactly as you have done, the very first one, you leave it empty. The second one, you leave it, that's the end, and also you leave it empty. So if you do this and run this, it will give us what? A copy of what? A particular what kind of what? Strings. So you can decide to, in this particular one, you have not saved it at all. If you run it at some point, it will not, if you want it, this is a copy of it, but it is not stored in a particular kind of another variable. So if you want a copy of it defined or ready for you, you can decide to just copy this. And what are you going to do? You're going to just maybe create a variable name again, say copy numbers, okay? Just say copy numbers and define it as a new variable on your own and just paste it here. Remember what we just did. So definitely if you call copy of numbers here, call copy underscore numbers. So if we call copy underscore numbers here, if we call it our shift enter, it will definitely do what? Do be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So numbers already has now been copied to what? Copy underscore numbers. So at this particular point, I would love to continue and go into negative index. By the time we go to negative index, we see a whole lot of things. Instead of counting from 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, we are counting from what? From the right to what? Left. So that's what it means to have a negative index or a reverse index that starts from what? In this particular one, it's not starting from 0. It's going to start with what? -1. So at this particular point, I would like to say, let's stop here for tonight. And apologies once more for missing yesterday's class. I tried as much as possible to meet up, but when I got home, I was like, God of mercy, I could not. There's no way I could have been so 100% fit for that class. But nevertheless, that's not an excuse. I've signed up. I've signed my own form here that I'm going to be up to task at any point in time. I'll always be available just to make sure that you guys learn and have the best of it all. So apologies for that yesterday, and I'm very sure that this class has been made up and you understand everything that we have been taught. If you do not understand this, please let me know. Now, let me know. Or is there anything that we should do to help you guys, to help you to join in and get to understand the whole concept of Python programming very well? Please let me know. I even started a series on my LinkedIn account, 30 days of 30 days of a kind of foundational level of understanding data science. I think I just started 6 days ago. It's just more of like an introductory stage, but you need to understand Python very well, either Python or R very well. So maybe later on, maybe in the nearest future, if you are interested in getting to know data science, it's something that you have to really pay attention to. And let's see how we can make it up at some point. The main essence is for you to use this Python and get into a particular field. You can decide to choose web development, you can decide to choose automation, you can decide to choose ethical hacking, you can decide to choose game development, you can decide to choose machine learning, data science, you can also decide to go into data analysis. Someone like me, I went into data science and I'm still in the field. I'm trying. Every day is a learning process. A certain data that we tend to like get from. I think one of the challenging steps in data science is data wrangling, data pre-processing, how we can deal with dirty data, how we can wrangle data. And trust me, when I started, it was not as when I'm right now in the field. It's really, really something that you need to get to understand the whole concept of Python, hold Python very well, and get to understand what it's actually doing, not just copying codes from different sites, and yet you don't understand what that code is doing. You have to understand what it is doing, because if you do not, right, without wasting much of your time, I'd like to say good night from here, and thank you for joining in. Thank you, Mr. Mark, Mr. Mark. Thank you very much, very much. Okay.